You know the one, the plaza with the fountain, tucked at the foot of some glass office tower downtown. The benches are clean. There are actual trees. Maybe a coffee cart, a bit of public art, people eating lunch in the sun. After a whole city of spikes and slanted seats, it feels like somewhere finally got it right. A real public square. Open to everyone, just for you. Here's the thing they're counting on you never noticing. That square isn't public. It isn't a park. The city doesn't own it, doesn't run it, and didn't build it for you. It belongs to the company whose name is on the tower behind you, and you're standing on their property, by their permission, under their rules. There's even a name for it, one you've almost certainly never heard while sitting in one. Privately owned public space. The whole point of the design is that you can't tell. It's built to look exactly like a park. And feel exactly like a park, so you'll act the way you do in a park, and never ask the obvious question. If this is public, why does it have an owner? Because the moment you do something an owner doesn't like, take out a camera, hand out a flyer, lie down on a bench, linger a little too long, you find out fast. The friendly square has a rulebook, and it isn't the law, it's a landlord's. So this is a video about the fake parks, where they came from, why a corporation would ever hand you a plaza, and what really happens the day you treat one like it's yours. Because once you learn to spot them, you'll realize a lot of the public city was quietly sold off a long time ago, and nobody told you. So how does a private company end up owning the park you're sitting in? You'd think that's the sort of thing a city would notice. The truth is, the city set it up on purpose. Rewind to 1961. New York is rebuilding, towers are going up everywhere, and the city has two problems it can't afford to solve. It wants more open space. Light, air, somewhere to breathe between the skyscrapers. But it doesn't want to buy the land or pay to keep it up. And developers want to build bigger, taller, denser than the rules allow. So the city offers them a deal. And it's a beautiful one if you're a developer. Build us a public plaza at the base of your tower, the city says, and we'll let you build extra floors on top. The arithmetic was generous. For every square foot of plaza you give up at street level, you can add 10 square feet of rentable space upstairs. Surrender a slice of ground floor, get 6, 7, 8 extra stories of offices or luxury apartments to sell. The public gets a square, the city gets it for free, and you get a skyscraper the rules would never otherwise have let you build. That single trade rewired the map. Between the deal's birth and the year 2000, developers put up more than 500 of these spaces across over 300 buildings, and in exchange, they were handed 16 million square feet of extra private floor space. That's the equivalent of roughly 6 Empire State Buildings, conjured out of thin air and paid for in plazas. The public's cut came to about 80 acres of so-called public space, around a tenth the size of Central Park, scattered in slivers across the city. Today, there are more than 590 of them. So when you sit down in one of these squares, understand what you're actually sitting in. It's not a gift. It's the leftover, the small patch of ground a developer surrendered so they could build something enormous and profitable above your head. The plaza isn't the point of the building. You're not the customer. You're the price of admission the city charged on your behalf, and then quietly let the landlord keep the keys to. Here's where the deception earns its name. A real public park belongs to all of you, which means the rules that govern it are public too. They're set by a government you can vote out, written down in law, and limited by your actual rights. You can hand out leaflets there. You can film. You can hold up a sign. You can sit and do nothing for as long as you like, because doing nothing in public is not a crime. A privately owned public space only looks like that park. Underneath, it runs on a completely different operating system. The owner writes the rules, and they can write almost anything they want. No photography, no filming, no leafleting, no commercial activity, no protests, no gatherings, no demonstrations, no lying down, no sleeping, no skateboarding, no bikes, and no behavior the owner deems objectionable. A phrase that conveniently means whatever the owner decides it means on the day. And because it's private property, they don't need a law on their side to enforce any of it. In a real park, an officer needs you to have actually broken a law before they can move you. In a fake one, you agreed to the house rules the moment you walked in, and breaking a house rule is all the reason a private security guard needs to ask you to leave. Not arrest you, just remove you, quietly. No charge, no record, no real way to argue. You weren't a citizen exercising a right, you were a visitor who outstayed your welcome. Somewhere near the edge of the space, there's usually a small plaque or sign you've never once stopped to read. Legally, it's meant to tell you this is a public space, what hours it's open, sometimes what you're allowed to do there. In practice, it's mounted low, set in small type, and easy to walk straight past, which suits everyone who benefits from you not knowing the difference. The whole arrangement only holds together as long as you assume you have rights here that you don't actually have. So the plaza greets you with open arms and good lighting, while somewhere a clipboard of rules waits to be enforced the instant you become inconvenient. The smile is real, so is the leash. You just can't see where it's attached. Now, you might be thinking the deal still sounds fine. The city got 80 acres of public space out of it. Even leftover space is still space, right? Here's the second half of the con. A lot of these places were never really built to be used at all. When that Harvard team finally went and audited every one of New York's privately owned public spaces, what they found was damning. Around 4 in 10 of them were of marginal quality, barren, windswept, hostile little patches that technically satisfied the deal and served almost nobody. And a significant number of owners had gone further than that. They'd illegally privatized the spaces outright, walling off, locking up, or quietly absorbing the very ground they'd been handed extra skyscraper floors to keep public. Once you know that, you start seeing the tricks. The plaza that's really a blank slab of granite with nowhere to sit and no reason to stop. The public arcade that turns out to be the building's driveway. The pocket park with a locked gate and posted hours so short it's shut whenever you'd actually want it. The lovely planters positioned, somehow, exactly where a bench should be. None of this is an accident. A space you can't comfortably use is a space that quietly stays empty, and an empty space is one the owner never really has to share. This is where the fake park stops being its own separate trick and becomes the same one you already know. Because the tools are identical to coercive architecture everywhere else, the ledge you can't lie on, the seat angled to move you along, the corner with no shelter, the defensive design in cities dressed up as landscaping. The owner doesn't need to ban you from the plaza, they just need to build a plaza that makes staying unpleasant enough that you leave on your own, and call it your idea. So the bargain the city struck on your behalf turns out to have 2 layers of fine print. First, the space was only ever the leftover, and second, even that leftover was often designed to stop you using it. You were promised a public square. What a lot of people actually got was an expensive, beautifully maintained way of being told to keep moving. For decades, almost nobody noticed any of this. The fake parks worked precisely because they were invisible. And then, in the autumn of 2011, one of them gave the whole game away. When Occupy Wall Street went looking for somewhere to camp in Lower Manhattan, they ended up in a place called Zuccotti Park, and they chose it for a reason that's almost too perfect. Zuccotti wasn't a public park. It was a privately owned public space, owned by a property company. A normal city park closes at night and turns you out at curfew, but because Zuccotti was one of these private plazas, it was legally required to stay open 24 hours a day. The very rule meant to keep it public was what let the protesters legally stay around the clock in a way they never could have in an actual park. So for a few weeks, the loophole cut the other way, and people used the space as if it belonged to them. And that is exactly when the owner remembered that it didn't. The contradiction at the heart of the fake park became impossible to hide. A space that has to stay open to the public, but answers to a private owner who never agreed to host a movement. It ended the way these things end. The plaza cleared, the rules suddenly and fully enforced, and a very firm reminder of whose property it had been the entire time. The same story played out across the Atlantic. When protesters in London tried to occupy Paternoster Square, home of the London Stock Exchange, they discovered it was private land, and it was simply sealed off with a court injunction. Gates shut, access denied. They got pushed onto the steps of the cathedral next door instead, because that, ironically, was easier to stand on than the public square. And quietly underneath all of it sits the thing that makes private control enforceable in the first place: the cameras. These plazas are some of the most heavily watched ground in any city. Private security, private CCTV, the steady fusion of urban design and surveillance. Because an owner can only enforce a rulebook on a space they can actually see. The fake park doesn't just set the rules, it watches to make sure you keep them. So walk back into that plaza one more time. The fountain, the trees, the clean benches, the lunch crowd in the sun. It looks exactly the same as it did at the start of this video. The only thing that's changed is you. Because now you know the square isn't a gift, it's a leftover. You know it exists so a tower could be bigger. You know the rules aren't the law, they're landlords. You know the welcome can be switched off the moment you become inconvenient, and that somewhere a camera is making sure you act like a guest and not an owner. The space didn't change, you just stopped mistaking it for public. And here's the part that should stay with you. This isn't a story about a few sneaky developers. It's about a city that decided public life was too expensive to provide itself, and quietly outsourced it to the people least interested in giving it away. Bit by bit, the genuinely public square, the one that belongs to everyone, governed by laws you can actually change, has been swapped for a private imitation that belongs to no one but its owner, and almost nobody was told the trade had happened. So next time you're standing in one of these places, do the small thing that breaks the spell. Find the plaque, read the hours, look for the rules nobody wants you to read, the camera nobody wants you to notice, and ask who this square is really built to serve. Tell me what you find in the comments. I want to know how many fake parks you've been walking past without realizing, because that's what this channel is for, learning to see the city you were told not to look at too closely. If you want to keep seeing it clearly, subscribe. The public square has been disappearing in plain sight for 60 years, and we're only just getting started.